A grocery store has less food sitting inside it than most people keep in their own kitchen over the course of a month. That sentence sounds wrong the first time you hear it. Walk into any supermarket and you see aisle after aisle, shelf after shelf, more food than one person could eat in a year. But almost none of that food is actually stored there. It is passing through. Think about the last time you did a normal weekly shop. You grabbed milk, bread, a few vegetables, maybe some chicken for dinner. You didn't think twice about whether the store would have it. Of course it would. It always does. That confidence is so automatic that most people have never once questioned it. It's the same quiet trust you place in a light switch or a faucet. You expect it to work, so you never think about everything happening behind the wall to make that possible. But here's the part almost nobody thinks about. That milk, that bread, that chicken, they were not sitting in a warehouse for weeks waiting for you. In most cases, they arrived on a truck within the last day or two, sometimes within hours. The supermarket is not really a storage building. It behaves more like a train station, where the food is always arriving and always leaving, and the shelf is just the platform where it waits briefly before it's gone. This is where the retail industry uses a term that sounds boring on paper, but explains almost everything once you understand it: days inventory outstanding. It measures how many days a store could survive selling from what it already has, if not a single new truck showed up. For the high turnover basics, things like milk, eggs, bread, and bottled water, most supermarkets in the United States sit at roughly 2 to 3 days. 2 to 3 days, not 2 to 3 weeks, not a month. Days. Now picture what happens the moment something unusual occurs. A hurricane warning, a snowstorm forecast, even just a rumor spreading online that something might run short. People don't shop like they normally do. They don't grab their usual few items. They start buying for 2 weeks, sometimes 4, as if trying to make up for a gap that doesn't even exist yet. And that shift doesn't need to be dramatic to break the system. Researchers who study retail behavior have found that a demand increase of just 30 to 50% above normal is enough to strip shelves bare within hours, not days. Here's the part that catches people off guard. Many assume that when shelves look empty, there must be more food sitting somewhere close by, just waiting to be restocked. A backroom. A warehouse behind those swinging double doors near the registers. Surely that's where the extra pallets are kept. It isn't. In a modern supermarket, roughly 80 to 90% of the entire building is the sales floor itself. What's visible to you is almost the whole store. The space behind those doors is small, and it isn't built for storage. It's built for unloading trucks, breaking down cardboard, and staging waste for pickup. There is no hidden mountain of extra product waiting to be wheeled out. When the shelf is empty, the store is empty. This wasn't always considered a weakness. It was actually designed this way, on purpose, because it works extremely well under normal conditions. The strategy has a name: just-in-time inventory. The idea is simple. Instead of paying to store thousands of extra items that just sit there costing money, a store keeps only what it expects to sell in the next day or two and lets a constant stream of trucks handle the rest. Fewer products sitting idle means lower costs. Lower costs mean lower prices on the shelf. It's one of the reasons grocery prices in wealthy countries have stayed as low as they have for decades. There's a kind of quiet genius in this. A store isn't really guessing how much bread to keep on hand. It's running something closer to a moving average, constantly adjusting to yesterday's sales, this morning's delivery, and tomorrow's forecast. When conditions are normal, this process is almost perfectly tuned. It's a bit like a musician playing without sheet music, relying entirely on rhythm and repetition. The moment that rhythm gets interrupted, though, the whole performance is exposed. For a system built entirely around speed and precision, everything depends on one invisible assumption: that the trucks keep coming, exactly on schedule, without interruption. And that assumption rests on something most people never think about at all: trucking. In the United States, more than 70% of all freight, by weight, moves by truck. Not rail, not ships, not planes, trucks. If highway routes slow down, if fuel becomes harder to move, if drivers can't get where they're going, the entire chain that fills your local store starts to wobble almost immediately. The American Trucking Association has studied exactly what happens when that chain is interrupted in a report with a blunt title: When Trucks Stop, America Stops. Their research lays out a rough timeline. Within the first day, certain essential goods in affected areas start becoming harder to find. Within 2 days, grocery stores in the impacted region see serious depletion across multiple categories, not just 1 or 2 items. By the 3rd day, shelves are largely empty, and the psychological effect of seeing empty shelves starts feeding on itself, pushing even calmer shoppers into buying more than they need, just in case. Notice what's happening here. It's not one single cause. It's a chain reaction. A weather event, or a fuel disruption, or even just a viral rumor shifts buyer behavior. That shift increases demand at the store level by a relatively modest amount, but the response doesn't stay modest. Distribution centers see that spike and, trying to keep up, overcorrect. Supply chain researchers call this the bullwhip effect. A 20% jump in demand at the register can turn into orders 50 to 100% higher further up the chain, as everyone tries to protect themselves from running short. The system that was built for precision suddenly has to process far more volume than it was ever designed to handle, and that's exactly when it jams. It helps to think of it less like a shortage and more like a traffic jam. Nobody removed a single lane from the highway. There isn't less road than there was yesterday. But the moment too many cars try to merge onto it at the same time, speed collapses, and everything backs up for miles. Grocery distribution behaves the same way. The food exists. The trucks exist. What breaks is the timing, the sequencing, the ability to move an unusual volume through a system tuned for an ordinary one. This is also why the shortage tends to spread faster than the original event that caused it. One shopper sees a half-empty shelf and decides to buy extra, just to be safe. The next shopper sees that same shelf a few hours later, except now it looks even worse, so they buy more than the first shopper did. Nobody in this chain is acting unreasonably. Each person is simply reacting to what they see in front of them. But the combined effect is a feedback loop, where the appearance of scarcity becomes the very thing that creates real scarcity, hours before the original cause even reaches its peak. So when people see a truck struggling to get through a closed highway or a regional distribution center falling behind, it's tempting to assume the actual problem is a shortage of food. It almost never is. In the vast majority of documented grocery panics, including major snowstorms and the disruptions of 2020, the food itself was never the issue. Farms were still producing. Warehouses upstream still had product. What broke down was movement, not supply. Getting the right amount of food to the right place, fast enough to match a sudden spike in buying, that's the actual weak point. It's a logistics problem wearing the costume of a food shortage. This raises an obvious question. If food shortages during emergencies aren't really about food, then who steps in when local stores run dry? Many people assume there's a government safety net designed exactly for this, some kind of national reserve that quietly kicks in these moments. There is a piece of truth here, but it's smaller than most people think. FEMA does maintain emergency supplies, things like water and ready-to-eat meals. But those reserves exist for short-term disaster relief, for people directly affected by a specific event, not as a backup source for restocking regular grocery stores across an entire city or region. FEMA's own guidance on supply chain resilience makes a point of noting that private companies, not government agencies, own and manage the overwhelming majority of the infrastructure that keeps commercial food distribution running. When trucking and retail supply chains recover, it's private trucking companies, private distributors, and private retailers doing the recovering. There isn't a large hidden government warehouse standing by to refill supermarket shelves at scale. So the honest picture looks like this: a remarkably efficient system, one engineered over decades to be fast, lean, and inexpensive, runs on a buffer of about 2 to 3 days. Most of the time, that's more than enough, because deliveries are constant and predictable. But that same efficiency means there is very little room for error, and almost no room for a sudden, sharp change in ordinary behavior. Here's the detail that tends to stay with people the longest. The very system praised for keeping food prices low and shelves consistently full is the same system that has almost no cushion built in for anything unexpected. Efficiency and fragility, in this case, came from the exact same decision. None of this means the system is broken or that it's some kind of secret failure being hidden from the public. Under normal, day-to-day conditions, this model works about as well as a logistics system can work. Trucks arrive on schedule. Shelves get restocked overnight. Almost nobody notices the choreography behind it, because it almost never fails to show up on time. In fact, it's worth remembering that this exact system feeds hundreds of millions of people every single day without most of them ever giving it a second thought. That kind of quiet reliability is rare, and it deserves some credit, even while we look honestly at where its limits sit. But that reliability is also what creates the blind spot. Most people have never seen this system under real strain, so they've never had a reason to question it. Seeing full shelves every single week trains the brain to expect full shelves forever. That expectation isn't wrong exactly, it's just built on an experience that only reflects normal conditions, not the edges of the system. There's an old idea in psychology that fits perfectly here. People tend to believe the future will resemble the recent past, simply because that's all they've ever experienced. It's why so many shoppers walk past empty shelves during a storm looking genuinely stunned, as if this had never happened anywhere before, when in reality, the same basic sequence plays out almost every time conditions shift suddenly. The store didn't fail. The buffer just did exactly what a 2 to 3 day buffer was always going to do once demand jumped. Understanding how thin that buffer really is changes how the whole picture looks. It's not really about a single disaster or a single storm. It's about recognizing that ordinary daily life quietly depends on a chain of trucks that most of us have never thought about, moving on a schedule most of us have never questioned, feeding stores that we've simply learned to trust without asking why. That doesn't call for panic. Panic is actually part of what breaks the system in the first place, since panic buying is the very trigger that turns a 2 to 3 day buffer into empty shelves within hours. In a strange way, the fear of a shortage does more damage to the shelf than almost anything else could. What the research calls for instead is a more accurate picture of how things actually work, one that replaces blind assumption with a clearer understanding of where the real limits are. Keeping a modest supply of food and water at home, enough to comfortably cover a couple of weeks rather than a couple of days, isn't an extreme response to this. Given everything the research shows about how thin that retail buffer really is, it looks more like ordinary, sensible planning, the same kind of planning that leads people to keep a spare tire in the car, even though most drives end without a single flat. Not because disaster is guaranteed, not because the system is fragile in some dramatic, collapsing sense, but because the gap between a fully stocked store and an empty one has always been smaller than most people ever imagined, and now you know exactly why. If you'd like to explore some helpful resources, you'll find them in the description.